What if I told you that somewhere in the mountains of Romania, locked away in a psychiatric facility, sits a man who claims he can see your death? Not just anyone's death, but specifically yours. He describes it in vivid detail to anyone who will listen. The doctors say he's been doing this for 37 years. And here's the terrifying part. He's never been wrong. His name is Victor Moldovan, and his story begins with a black diamond that was never supposed to exist. In 1987, Victor was a gemologist working for the Romanian Ministry of Geology. He was 32 years old, married, with twin daughters who had just turned 5. By all accounts, he was a rational man who dealt in facts, measurements, and chemical compositions. He didn't believe in curses or supernatural nonsense that changed. On October 13, 1980-7. Victor received a package with no return address. Inside was a diamond unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't just black. It seemed to absorb light itself, creating a void in his laboratory. The stone was roughly 2 carats, perfectly cut, and when he held it up to examine it, he later claimed he could see things moving inside it. Like shadows swimming in dark water, the accompanying note was written in Old Church Slavonic, a language Victor barely understood. A colleague translated it for him. The Eye of Koschei sees all futures, all deaths, all endings. He who consumes the darkness shall speak the truth of the final moment. Victor was intrigued but skeptical. He ran every test he could think of. The diamond's composition was impossible. It contained trace elements that shouldn't exist in nature, arranged in crystalline structures that defied known physics. Under spectroscopic analysis, it appeared to be made of compressed space itself. For 3 weeks, Victor obsessed over the diamond. He brought it home, studied it at night, carried it in his pocket during the day. His wife Maria noticed the change immediately. He stopped eating, barely slept, and spent hours staring at the stone as if it were speaking to him. On November 5, 1987, a massive storm hit Bucharest. The kind of storm that happens maybe once in a century. Lightning struck their building 7 times in 1 hour. During the worst of it, Victor was in his study, examining the diamond by candlelight when the power went out. What happened next was witnessed by his wife and daughters. Though they didn't understand what they were seeing at the time, according to Maria's testimony, Victor suddenly stood up, walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and dropped the diamond into it. Before anyone could stop him, he drank it down in 1 gulp. The moment the stone passed his lips, she said, his eyes turned completely black, like 2 pieces of the diamond had replaced them. Then he began to speak, but it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, older, and he was speaking in languages Maria had never heard. For 6 hours, he stood in their living room, speaking continuously in these strange tongues while his daughters hid behind their mother. When the storm passed and Victor's eyes returned to normal, he had no memory of what happened. But something fundamental had changed. That evening, he told Maria exactly how her mother would die. 3 days later, her mother, who lived 200 miles away and had been in perfect health, died exactly as Victor described, a heart attack while feeding pigeons in the park at 4:37 in the afternoon. Victor was horrified. He tried to convince himself it was a coincidence, but the next morning, he told his neighbor how her husband would die in a car accident the following Tuesday. When it happened exactly as predicted, right down to the specific intersection and the color of the other car, people began to take notice. Word spread quickly through their small community. Victor couldn't control when the visions came. He would be having a normal conversation with someone when suddenly their future death would flash before his eyes in perfect, horrifying clarity. And he couldn't stop himself from describing what he saw. Mrs. Popescu from apartment 4 would choke on a fishbone during Christmas dinner. Mr. Antonescu from the corner shop would die of a brain aneurysm while arguing with his son about money. The young priest from the local church would be struck by lightning while giving last rites to a dying parishioner. Every single prediction came true. The authorities tried to use Victor's ability for their own purposes. They brought him unsolved cases, missing persons files, hoping he could provide answers. But Victor's gift didn't work that way. He could only see how people would die, and only when he was in their presence. The visions were involuntary, unstoppable, and always accurate. The psychological toll was immediate and devastating. Victor began losing weight rapidly. He couldn't eat without vomiting, couldn't sleep without nightmares of endless death scenes playing in his mind. His hair turned completely white within 6 months. His wife said it was like watching someone die from the inside out. But the worst part was the isolation. Nobody wanted to be around Victor anymore. Friends stopped visiting. Colleagues avoided him at work. Even his own daughters were afraid to be in the same room with him, terrified that he might tell them how they would die. The breaking point came on June 21, 1980. Victor was at his local market when he saw a young mother with her baby. The vision that came to him was so horrific, so utterly devastating, that he began screaming in the middle of the store, describing in graphic detail how both mother and child would die in a house fire the following week. The woman was traumatized. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at her baby without seeing the terrible future Victor had described. When the fire happened exactly as he predicted, she had a complete mental breakdown. That night, Victor tried to kill himself. He took every pill in his medicine cabinet, but somehow survived. When asked why he wanted to die, he told the doctors, "I saw my own death. I saw myself living for decades more, watching everyone I meet die, unable to save any of them, unable to stop seeing their final moments. Death would be mercy." The Romanian government committed Victor to the Brasov Psychiatric Institute, where he remains to this day. For 37 years, he has been confined to a single room, seeing only his doctors and the occasional researcher brave enough to study his case. Dr. Alina Stoica has been Victor's primary psychiatrist for 23 years. She's published several papers about his condition, though the medical community largely dismisses her work as elaborate fiction. In our interview, she told me something that still gives me nightmares. "Victor ages differently than normal people," she said. "He should be 69 years old now, but he looks exactly the same as he did when he arrived 37 years ago. His body refuses to age, as if death itself is avoiding him. We've run every test imaginable. His cellular structure is completely normal, except for one thing. His DNA contains the same impossible elements we found in trace amounts throughout his system. The diamond is still there, somehow, integrated into his very being." Dr. Stoica showed me Victor's journals, thousands of pages of predictions written in 12 different languages, many of which he never learned. The predictions date decades into the future, describing deaths that won't occur for years or even decades. She keeps a running tally out of 743 predictions that have reached their dates. Every single one has come true. But here's what haunts me most about this story. Dr. Stoica told me that Victor has written something about everyone he's ever met. Everyone, including the researchers who studied him, the doctors who treated him, even the guards who brought him food. She keeps these predictions locked in a safe, sealed and dated. "He wrote something about you too," she told me during our interview. "The moment you walked into his room, his eyes went black and he began writing. He wrote for 3 pages without stopping, then sealed it in an envelope with your name on it. The envelope sits on my desk as I record this. I haven't opened it. I don't know if I ever will. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring at it, wondering what Victor saw. Wondering if knowledge of our own death is a blessing or a curse." Victor himself gave me the answer to that question. During our brief interview, the only time his eyes remained normal throughout our conversation, he said something that I'll never forget. "The diamond didn't give me the ability to see death. Death was always there, surrounding all of us, every moment of every day. The diamond just removed the merciful blindness that lets us pretend otherwise." He paused, looking directly at me with those unsettling black eyes, and added, "Some gifts are punishments in disguise. Some knowledge is too terrible to bear. And sometimes, the future finds ways to make itself known, whether we want to see it or not." The Romanian government has tried to classify Victor's case, but too many people know the story. Too many predictions have come true. Too many lives have been shattered by the terrible knowledge he carries. There are rumors that similar diamonds have appeared throughout history. Ancient texts speak of the eyes of Kostya, legendary gems that could show the future to those brave or foolish enough to consume them. Most of these accounts were dismissed as folklore until Victor's case brought them into a different light. Archaeological evidence suggests these diamonds may have been created in laboratory conditions that shouldn't have existed thousands of years ago. Some researchers theorize they're not from Earth at all, but from somewhere else entirely. Somewhere where the laws of physics operate differently. What's certain is that Victor Moldovan sits in his room in Romania, writing in languages that predate civilization, describing deaths that haven't happened yet with perfect accuracy. Trapped in a body that refuses to age, cursed with knowledge that destroys everyone it touches, and sometimes, just sometimes, packages with no return address still appear on the desks of gemologists around the world, containing diamonds that absorb light and whisper secrets of the future to anyone foolish enough to listen. The question isn't whether Victor's story is true. The question is, if you received such a package tomorrow, would you have the wisdom to leave it unopened? Or would curiosity, that most human of traits, compel you to peer into the darkness and risk swallowing the future whole? Because according to Dr. Stoica's research, Victor wasn't the first person to consume one of these diamonds. He was just the first to survive the experience with his sanity relatively intact. The others, throughout history, didn't fare as well. Their stories are lost to time, buried in archives, and forgotten by history. But their names appear in Victor's journals, along with descriptions of how they died. Decades or centuries before he was even born, the diamond remembers everything. Every future it has shown, every death it has revealed, every soul it has touched across the centuries. And now, all of that terrible knowledge lives inside Victor Moldovan, a man who cannot die, cannot age, and cannot stop seeing the end of everyone he meets. So the next time you're walking down the street and you pass a stranger who looks at you a little too long, who seems to see something in your face that isn't there, remember Victor's story. Remember that some people carry knowledge too terrible to bear, and that the future, once seen, cannot be unseen. The envelope on my desk remains unopened, and it always will, because some truths are too dangerous to know, and some gifts are curses wrapped in curiosity. The black diamond is still out there, somewhere in the bloodstream of a man who cannot die, showing him futures that stretch into infinity, each one ending in death, each one coming true exactly as he describes. And Victor Moldovan sits in his room, writing tomorrow's obituaries in languages that died before Rome was built, carrying the weight of everyone's ending forever.